All right, we're going to get started in just a few moments. Corey, would you like to do a quick announcement regarding the interpretation? We have our attendees coming in the call now. We'll wait just a few moments and let everyone get in. But Corey, if you make a quick announcement for us.
All right. If anyone needs interpretation in Spanish, there will be a globe at the bottom of the screen that you will be able to click on to select your language. Si alguien necesita la interpretación en español, hay un mundo ahí abajo de la pantalla donde se puede hacer clic para elegir el español. Y entonces se puede escuchar toda la interpretación en español mientras que mira toda la presentación. So you will be able to hear to see the whole presentation but you'll be hearing it in Spanish if you select Spanish as your language.
All right. Thank you so much, Corey. And we'll get started. Just a moment. All righty. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the community information session focused on the Bellwether Instructional Practices Audit Update, hosted by the Office of Community Engagement. I'm Daphne Kaiser, Assistant Superintendent for School Community Engagement, and your moderator for this event. During tonight's session, we will have Albemarle County Public School division leaders who will give an overview of the steps taken this year, as well as provide the outline of the roadmap for implementing the Bellwether recommendations. Our goal for the evening is to inform the community of the progress Albemarle County Public Schools has made concerning the Bellwether audit recommendations. This session is a key part of our ongoing commitment to our strategic plan, Learning for All, which aims to eliminate the predictive value of race, class, gender, and special capacities on our children's success, ensuring high-quality teaching and learning for all. Our district-level departments and schools have been working to implement these recommendations, with steering teams being formed to include teachers, parents, and administrators, particularly focusing on areas such as reading, math, professional development, and community outreach. Throughout this school year, we have been continuing many projects focused towards meeting these goals. Of note is the development of the Theory of Change document, which you'll hear about in just a few moments, that is meant to guide us through these changes in a meaningful and intentional ways. In addition to hearing from panelists during the first hour of the community information session, participants will have an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the presentation part of the session. Tonight's agenda includes a welcome from Albemarle County Public Schools Superintendent, Dr. Matthew Haas, an introduction from the moderator of our panelists who will be presenting, presentations from our esteemed panelists, question and answer session, and Dr. Irizarry, Director of Equity, School, Family, and Community Relations, will close out our time together with final thoughts and next steps. We appreciate you spending time to be with us, and now I will turn it over to Dr. Haas for the welcome.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kaiser, and thank you very, very much for all of the effort and the organization and planning that you put into these community information sessions. I think you do an outstanding job with these among your many other duties, and I think it comes from a real desire to share what we're doing in Albemarle County Schools so that we can help all of our students experience the success that they should be experiencing. I thank all of our panelists tonight. I was scanning the panel earlier, and I am very grateful to be able to work with outstanding educators of this caliber, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you tonight. The old expression is that if you keep doing the same thing, you're going to keep getting the same results. And I think that's been part of the story for Albemarle County Schools for decades. And I want to thank all of our families out there, family council, other groups that really shared their views early on in my tenure as a superintendent with their desire to have equity in the success of our students in Albemarle County schools. I thank our visionary school board for wanting more for our kids and more for our families, and everyone coming together to demand more and to demand something different. And sometimes when you don't know exactly what to do, that's going to be different when you're doing all the evidence-based practices. It is beneficial to bring in an outside expert, a consultant. And so we spent time seeking offers from consultants in the field, and the top choice was Bellwether, an education consultant firm. They rigorously analyzed our school system's data, our operations, personnel, how we communicate, a myriad of structures with our school system, and came back with recommendations and action steps that will lead us on a path to success. And many of them were in the works, but also many of them are new to Albemarle County Schools and have really shifted not just our structures, but the culture of our school system. And we're already beginning to see results from that. So we are doing things differently, and we anticipate different results for all of our families, for all of our students. Thank you very much, Dr. Kaiser, and I'm looking forward to see this update. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Haas. We have a really great group of panelists joining us this evening. Our presenters will share about 8 minutes worth of information related to their diverse roles pertaining to the Bellwether instructional audit recommendations. But before I do that, in a moment, I will introduce the panelists in the order in which they will present. But I want to take a moment for Mr. Yago to talk to us a little bit about interpretation and get the interpretation room started. So, Mr. Yago, if you would please share with us, and we'll get you started with interpretation.
All right, thank you very much. Again, if anyone needs interpretation in Spanish, there will be a little world that will appear at the bottom of your screen, and you can click on this to select Spanish so that you can hear the presentation in Spanish. Si alguien necesita la interpretación en español, habrá un mundo abajo de la pantalla para que se puede elegir el español para escuchar todo el evento en español. So, can someone turn on that feature? That way I can start rolling with it.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
I'm on that now. All right. Thank you. All right. We'll be recording this session, and information will be posted on our ACPS YouTube channel. You will have access to this information as long as you need to, and we will be sending it out to the community so that everyone will have an opportunity to watch, even if they were not able to attend tonight. Again, please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom. We will not answer them until after the presenters have had their 8 minutes to speak. We will take about 30 minutes at the end of the session after our panelists have presented to answer questions. At this time, I would like to introduce our panelists. From the Albemarle County Public Schools Central Office, we have Ms. Jamie Gellner, Director of Special Projects, Program Evaluation, and Department Improvement, who will give an overview of the Bellwether audit recommendations and updates. In addition, Ms. Gellner will provide a summary of the theory of change. Dr. Michelle Kastner, Executive Director for Elementary Education, and Ms. Karen Heathcock, Lead Coach for K-5 Language Arts, who will share information about the English Language Arts adoption and implementation. Ms. Melissa Meacham, Lead Coach for Math, who will provide information about math and Algebra 1, as well as quarterly assessments. Mr. Craig Domer, Director of Instruction, Tiered Supports, who will provide information about instructional coaching, high-quality instructional materials, and intervention. And Dr. Eric Irizarry, Director of Equity, School, Family, and Community Relations, who will discuss the family-friendly instructional guides and the family engagement content events. All of our work and everything we do in ACPS is centered around our strategic plan, Learning for All. Our vision: learners are engaged in authentic, challenging, and relevant learning experiences, becoming lifelong contributors and leaders in our dynamic and diverse society. Our mission: working together as a team, we will end the predictive value of race, gender, and special capacities for our children's success through high-quality teaching and learning for all. We seek to build relationships with families and communities to ensure that every student succeeds. We will know every student. Our values include equity, excellence, family, and community, and wellness. Our goals: thriving students, affirming and empowering communities, and equitable and transformative resources. And although our session tonight touches on all of our goals, the primary focus will be around Goal 1 and 2, thriving students and affirming and empowering communities. Now I'm going to turn it over to our panelists, and we will come back in a short while to answer questions afterwards. First up, we have Ms. Jamie Gellner, Director of Special Projects, Program Evaluation, and Department Improvement.
Hello, and I just want to thank everybody for attending tonight. I really appreciate, all of us appreciate your engagement and interest in this really important work. My email is jgellner@k12albemarle.org in case you want to send me a question specifically. So last year, the school division conducted an instructional audit that asked this essential question: why are SOL pass rates for our students of color in K-5 reading and math and high school algebra 1 lower than the averages of other students of color in the state and lower than their peers? We put together a task force that included multiple different groups, families, administrators, teachers, and we studied districts that succeed. We also partnered with a third-party vendor, Bellwether, who conducted the audit. Next slide. I think we're maybe missing one slide. Can you go back one? So Bellwether prepared 4 reports outlining the experiences of our students of color with 15 themes and 5 root causes. 3 root causes were related to the instructional core, which are the instructional tasks, adult learning, and curricular resources, and 2 were related to systems and structures, like strategic alignment and stakeholder engagement. You'll hear tonight about projects under each of these categories. If you want to check out the full reports, you can find it linked above. Eric, maybe you can put that in the chat. That'll go directly to the reports that Bellwether gave us last June. And if you want to check the status of our progress on each of these projects, there's also a link there to the status board, which is also located on our website. So maybe we can drop that in the chat too. Bellwether recommended that we develop a theory of change document. This falls under the category of strategic alignment, and its purpose is to shift behaviors. Cultural change is important and difficult work, and this first step creates the document that articulates how we will work together to achieve student outcomes. The next step is to use this theory to make changes to how we actually do business in terms of working with people and how we do the work. Next slide. The process to create this document started last summer and officially in October. We gathered input from all stakeholders throughout the year to develop this first draft of our theory of change. The goal is to annually provide opportunities for different groups to provide feedback about where we are meeting expectations and where we still have work to do. Most importantly, Internally, school teams and individuals should refer to our values of equity, excellence, family and community, and wellness, and this tool to reflect on how we're doing the work. Central office will work to continually refine our systems and structures to be a school system who centers the instructional core. So this is there's a more detailed written version that accompanies this visual, and that hasn't been completely rolled out yet. But this draft of our theory of change was presented at the first budget work session to the school board. This set of actions breaks out some of the assumptions in our mission statement about working together as a team. Along with our values, these are kind of a minimum set of expectations for each group. And these are a series of assumptions of how we do the work that we strive towards. The strategic plan is the set of actions along with school and department plans. And the mission and the vision are the outcomes we're striving towards.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for being with us this evening. I'm Michelle Kastner. I'm the Executive Director of Elementary Schools, and we've had an exciting year connected to one of the key recommendations from the Bellwether report. And the first recommendation was for us to adopt a new ELA curriculum for kindergarten through 5th grade. Eric, you can move the slide. Yep. And so our commitment from the very beginning was to create and follow a process that was transparent to parents, guardians, and community members, staff, and the school board. Our goal was to be inclusive the entire way through because we wanted to hear from all voices across the entire school system and community. We wanted to be very thoughtful. We thought about today's learners and the learners who are coming to us in the future. And we established a very, very clear process with attention to all the details. And now Karen Hefcock is going to talk about the process we went through.
Thank you. Yes, we started working in earnest at the very beginning of this school year. We first gathered a steering committee made up of educators and equity specialists, technology department. And we set about getting a collection from each of our elementary schools, plus the community, plus caregivers, to come together, 60 plus members in October. The Bellwether report actually kind of dovetails with the VDOE passing the Virginia Literacy Act, which requires school divisions to use one of 6 state-approved programs. And so the 60 plus members, we went through with a fine-tooth comb these state-approved options so that we could narrow it to make sure that we're presenting kind of the best of the 6 that would meet our needs to all of our elementary teachers and community members. So we did that through the fall into the winter. Right after Thanksgiving, we actually had narrowed to HMH into Reading, Virginia, and Benchmark. And we put those sample kits for each grade level into every one of our elementary schools and had feedback. We and principals worked with us to make sure that they gave teachers the time to actually go through these, ask questions, go through the digital resources, the everything that HMH has. And we did the same for caregivers. We actually received feedback from, I believe, 85% of our teachers gave feedback on their preferences, what they liked and didn't like about each of those 2 programs. Community members, we heard from almost 200 community members, I believe. There it is, yeah, 201. And so from that, the recommendation that went forward to the board, and we did hear from each publisher came to do presentations to the committee. So we recommended HMH to go forward, which was the preference of both teachers and caregivers. We did that in January, presented to the board, and in February, they approved it. So we were very intentional about being inclusive and really, really pushing to get feedback from as many people as we could. Could you forward the slide, please, Eric? Thank you. So the adoption happened in February, and we immediately then started working on what implementation and support for teachers would look like. We want to make sure that our teachers are supported and are prepared to implement this in August when school gets back in. So we started with a March 5th division-wide training of all of our elementary teachers by Dr. Conradi Smith on evidence-based literacy instruction and the shifts that research, science-based research is leading us toward. And so from that, we actually received feedback from teachers. So when HMH Into Reading Virginia comes and trains us, trains each grade level in April on a teacher work day, they are going, or a division professional learning day, they are going to focus on those shifts that teachers are wanting to learn more about in terms of how that's going to look in the classroom, because we are required that every minute of our language arts block is following evidence-based literacy instruction, and that's exactly what we intend to do. So HMH is prepared to come. 6 trainers are coming so that they are spending, kindergarten teachers will be together spending specific time around what the kindergarten curriculum will look like. First grade, second, third, fourth, and fifth are doing the exact same thing at the same time. July, we are going to give some optional evidence-based literacy instruction for teachers. And new teacher academy in August will be happening. The HMH trainers are going to return so that any new teachers to the district who didn't receive the April training will receive that training before pre-service week in August. And then in pre-service week, we'll have everyone together and we'll be doing some more ongoing learning related to HMH and evidence-based literacy instruction. So what we want to make sure we have in place is school-based and division level support for teachers. And that's going to be an ongoing thing through the next year, especially, and after that as well. So we will have HMH champions in every school, and we will have access to support from HMH through a coach lead license at each school level too. Also, in addition to that, the Virginia Literacy Act does require that we train teachers in evidence-based literacy instruction with an approved program. And so the one that we have selected is LETTERS, which is language essentials for teachers of reading and spelling. So all K-5 teachers of reading will be receiving that next year. We have a cohort of 30 people going through LETTERS right now so that we can be in-house facilitators at each of our schools for next year and support teachers as they're doing the work.
Thank you, Dr. Kastner and Ms. Heathcock. Next up, we have Ms. Melissa Meacham, lead coach for math.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to kind of piggyback off of where Karen left off. So I have a slide for you about math and Algebra 1, but if we could maybe just look at the bottom first, where it says high quality instructional materials, because in addition to the recommendation that Bellwether made for language arts materials, they said that we should also adopt some uniform high quality instructional materials for mathematics. So that process, that when we go through that for math, will look very similar. We do feel like the language arts systems that they put in place were very successful. Again, we want to have the same input from all of the individuals across our community. We want teachers to have input. We want specialists to have input. And of course, our families to have input on that process. What we are waiting for, and why our review process will be about 1.5 years behind theirs, is that the state of Virginia has just adopted brand new 2023 math standards that we will be teaching in the upcoming school year. And then they are putting the textbooks through the same approval process that they did for language arts. So I have a link there that we can put in the slide deck, but it can be found on the Virginia Department of Education website about that 2024 mathematics textbook review process. So again, we will be looking at the final approved books. They anticipate that list will be available to us in January of 2025. So again, we'll go through the same process that they did for language arts, but we may try to do it in a semester so that we can implement and utilize those new materials the following school year. Because of course we want to get those in the hands of our teachers and get those to our students as quickly as possible. But we want the process to be as thorough as what they just went through for HMH for reading. So now I'm going to jump back up to the top. So this year, we really focused our work on algebra, specifically high school algebra. So we know that math builds, that it spirals, that it is a set of skills that are scaffolded, and that early math is important, but Bellwether recommended that we try to come up with some short-term solutions that would support students who are taking Algebra 1 in high school this year and are maybe not as completely ready as they could be, right? That really need some additional supports and strategies to make sure that they are successful this year, since it is such a key and foundational course for higher mathematics. So we composed, somewhat similar to what you just heard from Ms. Heathcock, a team of teachers and administrators and equity specialists and coaches. And we sort of included a wide variety of voices that meet on a regular basis to actually look at algebra instruction in high school, look at problems of practice, as well as successes. And so that team meets and comes together to discuss what's working. And we made some mid-year recommendations as principals of the high schools are looking for staffing and scheduling, looking ahead at scheduling next year. So we did recommend some additional supports, off-day supports for students that could be identified based on some sound data metrics. So as they enter their 9th grade year taking Algebra 1, if we know, if we have evidence already from 8th grade that they have some areas that need some additional support, we want to make sure that we put that in place from the beginning of the year. I will praise the Algebra 1 teachers across the division at the high school level. They do meet regularly, and I'm able to attend some of those professional learning community meetings in their schools to hear about how they are really trying to partner with families, with school counselors, with interventionists, and support people that are in their building to meet the needs of all the students that they're serving this year. So I feel like we are making great strides, but again, we want to continue to go ahead and shore up and offer as much support in a very structured way and thoughtful way as we can. Now, backwards mapping, so kind of coming back down, one of the things that Bellwether wanted us to look at for next year for the middle school, again, to sort of prepare the students that are going to be future Algebra 1 high school students, was high intensity tutoring. Now, this just happened to coincide with the state passing an all-in tutoring mandate earlier this year that has been implemented about mid-year, where all of our students in grades 3 through 8 now have access to an online platform called Zern that provides very specific support via games and other activities and instructional lessons that students can access online. And so that resource is actually being paid for by the state of Virginia through next school year, to be certain. So we've it coincides with the Bellwether recommendations that we provide some high intensity tutoring. They had wanted us to look into piloting something next year in terms of high intensity tutoring at the middle school. And this was sort of a gift then from the VDOE. So we're definitely looking to see if the Zern platform is successful. We'll be monitoring that data very closely, because if that is a tool that is working to help our middle school students be better prepared for Algebra 1, then that would really kind of come to the top of the list for something that we would want to continue in the future. So continuing with professional learning communities, I'm sorry, I know I skipped to the bottom, Eric, but then I came back up. So we, again, with the middle school component, Dr. Carlock, who's actually also on this call, has been working with a small team of middle school math teachers who were very passionate about looking at the data that we have in the division about this very equity issue that we've been talking about all along, and really trying to come up with some firm recommendations about how we can sort of marry the two things together that Bellwether's recommending. How are we making sure that all of our middle school courses are preparing students for algebraic thinking, preparing them to be successful in Algebra 1? And then how do we ensure that the students that are enrolled in Algebra 1 in the middle school are representative of all of the students in our division, that we do have equitable access, but also equitable preparation. So how do we ensure as a division that students don't necessarily have to work twice as hard to accelerate, but that we are really designing our course pathways to ensure that they can be prepared for Algebra 1 simply by showing up and doing the work in their class, okay? Because right now we do have teachers that are working very hard, and families and students that are working very hard to access high school math in middle school. And they're having to seek extra help from tutoring and things of that nature. And we really want to do our best to make sure that it's really a part of their math program. So we're trying to, again, kind of backwards map. And then as we shore up the middle school, we will kind of work our way down to the upper elementary, because we know that it all builds. And of course, getting the high quality instructional materials and the professional development around that, all of that will support the future Algebra 1 success of all of our students. Now I'm ready to move on. Thank you. All right, I'm also going to talk to you this evening about quarterly assessments. One of the Bellwether recommendations was that we implement formative assessments that were common across the division, so that we could look for trends and patterns and take action based on what we were seeing across the division. So historically, we were giving a mid-year assessment, usually in language arts and math for certain, through those grades that take a standards of learning test at the end of the year. And so what's different about this year was that we designed a first quarter assessment that was just on the material that was taught in quarter 1. So those were given out for students in grades 3 through 5, both for reading and mathematics. And that data was available at the school level for grade level PLCs to analyze and react to. In other words, you know, if this was something that they taught, were there any surprises? Were there any concerns? Did the students do as they had expected they would? Or is this something that we need to revisit, right? And so through that process, it's been quite daunting. I'm just, in all honesty, you know, we've put forth a product and we've gotten feedback from various groups, content advisory teams. We've gotten feedback from school level PLC teams. We've revised the assessments, and of course then, you know, given them and decided, well, we may need to revise again. So it's been a very iterative process, and it's definitely been a building year, but it's been exciting to sort of have a common conversation around what high quality assessment looks like, and to ensure that we all are sort of shooting for the same target. So, you know, are we backwards mapping? Do we really know what we want the outcome to look like? And how well can we align that to what we expect students to see on an end of the year assessment from the state? So for elementary, we gave a quarter 1. The quarter 2 assessment included material that was taught mostly in quarter 2, but did have some review material from quarter 1 based on that quarter 1 assessment. So it was really meant then that teachers and students had a chance to sort of revisit, repractice, and come back and assess on it again. So we had a touch point to see if those interventions that we put in place were successful. And then quarter 3 was really more, especially in math, it was, you know, meant to be all material taught up to the end of quarter 3. So it gives the teachers a chance to say, you know, what are students retaining from the beginning of the year? What have they been successful on? And what might we need to revisit before they take an end of the year assessment? So secondary is a little bit different in that we gave those more for quarter 3 as a cumulative of the entire year. So the quarter 1 and the quarter 2 were still sort of taught material. Quarter 3 for language arts and math represent all of the course content. So that's a little bit different because those students are a little bit older and kind of, you can have a better conversation with them about, well, you may see a question here on something we haven't covered yet, but do your best on that. And we're going to take that information then and be able to decide, is this something we need to go into great detail? Or maybe it is something that you've managed to pick up through previous coursework, and we know we can now go a little bit faster. But we're really kind of using that to gauge where they are in relation to performance expectations for that end of year standard of learning assessment.
All right. Thank you so much, Ms. Mitchum. Now we're on to our next presenter, Mr. Craig Domer, Director of Instruction Tiered Supports.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. I think this conversation will be helpful, and I'm looking forward to sharing what has been done around 2 kind of big issues that were in the Bellwether report. The first really being instructional coaching, and the second being intervention and the high quality materials that go with those. I think we can start the coaching slides. The Bellwether report, I think, highlighted that instructional coaching can be a valuable tool, but they thought that the Albemarle County model wasn't impacting the work on the students' desks, so to speak, enough. So Miss Megan Wood is the Director of Professional Development. She and I have been leading this work throughout the year, and in trying to think about how to reframe the model of instructional coaching in Albemarle County, we kind of sought 3 pieces of data: some qualitative data, quantitative data, and what the research says about best practices in instructional coaching. We've been on kind of a 6-month feedback process. We solicited qualitative feedback in sessions with lead coaches, principals, assistant principals, coaches, and teachers. And we really tried to focus on these 7 themes based on what our model currently was and shifts that we were hearing people might want to make, and based on research. We also solicited quantitative feedback via a division-wide survey. We had about 319 participants, though we get a few answers, and we're up to about 350 or so now. One thing that really stuck out to us as we've been doing our research and going to a conference or 2 on coaching was this quote: "As with all things in coaching, the more clarity everyone has around process and expectations, the more likely it is that the process will result in its intended outcomes." And so based on all the feedback we received, and in thinking about this, we really thought about the roles that we've asked our instructional coaches to play. Instructional coaching started in 2009, and what we're calling instructional coaching 1.0. And it was just a different time in the school division. Coaches were set up to be kind of resource providers across schools to make sure that schools were sharing resources, and the teachers at one school got the good practices that maybe teachers in another school were using. They were set up to be mentors for teachers. And the model was really set up to take teachers out of the classroom to be coaches so that they themselves would be learners. These are all valid roles of an instructional coaching model, and ones that fit ACPS in 2009. I think what we learned from the Bellwether report and what we learned through research and from some feedback was that we needed to shift our roles. So as we move coaching into next year, we're really going to be working with our coaches to be instructional specialists to make sure that instruction and curriculum meet the needs of all students, that they provide a higher level of classroom support by increasing the quality and effectiveness of classroom instruction, and that they can facilitate learning experiences for teachers through professional learning to make sure that we have the very best practices in all of our classrooms. Excellent. In particular, we just wanted to highlight here some things that could look like for each of those 3 roles. I think you'll see that kind of continued emphasis on making sure that the work of coaches impacts the learning that students are doing. Another just important thing just we wanted to point out, we've been pointing out as we've been designing, is that there's just been a large increase in the number of novice teachers in Albemarle County Public Schools. When the model began, there were 30 novice teachers that year, and you can see that this year there are over 100. One of the roles of the current instructional coaching model is to mentor those novice teachers. And it's taking up a large portion of the resources of every coach at every school, and maybe not letting them get into as many veteran classrooms and touch as many students as we need them to. And so to that end, as part of the new model, we've carved out some staffing from the coaching staffing to train a few coaches to serve the majority of the novices across a school division, and leaving the majority of the coaches to make sure that instructional visions of individual school buildings and high quality instruction is in every classroom. As the division theory of change was being created, we kind of came up with our own just for this change in instructional coaching. And you can see it starts with defining the coaching role, making sure that our coaches are trained well, that they are supported with conditions in the schools by the administration of the schools, as well as division level administration, to effectively create good partnerships with teachers, that they really get into cycles of improvement of instruction that lead to student impact. That will be another big change that we make, is trying to evaluate the new model based on student achievement, not just changes in practice for the teachers. I think we have a good system to kind of measure the change in practice, but we are creating a system where we will attach it to how well the students are doing in the classroom. I'm going to switch now to intervention. I'm going to follow Miss Mitchum's lead. Oh, sorry. Missed one slide. Sorry, Eric. This all comes back also to our coaching values, which we have changed to be about equity, relationships, instructional excellence, and continuous improvement. Now I'll switch to academic intervention. I'm going to take a page from Ms. Mitchum's playbook and say that high quality instructional materials around intervention are also following a similar path. And I would say that the State Department of Education is setting us up nicely to help implement some of this Bellwether recommendations. The list of approved intervention materials, or at least the beginning of that list, just went to the State Board of Education today. And so we are hoping that we will create a similar process around intervention materials moving forward, as we have done with reading and that we will do with math. But academic intervention and tiered supports in Albemarle County is basically used for three primary purposes: directly serving students by providing instruction outside of the regular classroom, pushing into classrooms to provide additional instruction and or to work with the teachers to provide core instruction, and working with teachers to maximize learning in the regular classroom. Students are selected using assessment data, intervention performance, and classroom performance. A lot of the intervention resources were put on kind of the long-term recommendations for Bellwether, including, I think we had the last recommendation to codify the system of supports. That I think is because a lot of the core and tier 1 systems need to be in place before we land, but we jumped right in and started making some improvements immediately that I think are putting us onto a path of being able to accomplish those goals from the Bellwether report. We implemented some additional resources this year, particularly the ALEC system for middle school math. And we are using UFly to supplement core instruction in kindergarten and first grade to really give a structured literacy around phonological awareness. However, we're also using it in intervention in 2nd through 8th grade with individual groups, and where we have some of the largest gaps and the most needs for intervention, those schools are implementing a whole class in 2nd and 3rd grade to give good structured literacy instruction to the students who need it. Through the All-In program, we've have our Lexia Core 5 and Power Up and Zern. There have been some delays in that from the state, but we are live with Zern and we will be live with Lexia as of tomorrow afternoon. But those contracts do go through next year, and we're really hoping to leverage them. We changed some of our screening practices and protocols for this year. We are using the Dibbles screener for literacy in 6th through 9th grade, and we changed to the VALS, which is the approved state screener in kindergarten through 3rd grade. Both of those screeners do a nice job in screening kids for the skills around phonics and phonological awareness, which is giving us some good data for next steps. There's also more staffing this year, particularly at our high schools and at the smallest Title I schools as well. We are anticipating some state level changes for next year as we think about next steps. The Virginia Literacy Act that is set to go into effect next year has been changed from K3 to K8, which is helpful for us in the changes that we're making. The state is giving us some guidance around the role of reading specialists, around how to use them to provide some more classroom support, which is what the research shows when you have a large amount of students who need intervention in any one school, that changes to classroom instruction and extra supports in the classroom are the most helpful. We will get our approved intervention lists. Our state guidance about who will be screened in future years will also help us. And we expect the state to also approve universal screeners and progress monitoring tools that we will be able to implement. I just wanted to put this graph up here because we were able to kind of give screeners to more grade levels this year. It kind of gave us an interesting look at data K to 12. The blue line is those students who are identified as high risk based on those screeners. The green line is the number of students who failed the language arts SOL at that grade level. And we put the 20% in line because when you read research on intervention, response to intervention, they say about 20% of students should need extra support. Most of the state tests, it's higher than 20%, and in Albemarle County, it's higher than 20%. But in the long run, and if we had a good working system, hopefully we would get down to that orange line. Our next steps are to await our state-approved intervention and supplemental resources. We're trying to systemize support for 2 to 5 resources off that list for reading and math. We're going to implement our screening protocols next year for students in 4 through 8 in accordance with the Virginia Literacy Act. We'll create literacy plans for all students needing support. And we're going to implement an improved student-level data system that's currently out for contract. We have a contract with a company currently, but it was time to look at that again. Their contract had run out, and so by implementing an improved one, we're hoping to have more data for parents and teachers. We're going to use our learning communities of educators to systematize our decision processes around all of these new resources, and we'll work with language arts and math and core adoption to strengthen classroom instruction.
Thank you so much, Mr. Domer. Now, lastly, we have Dr. Irizarry, Director of Equity, School, Family, and Community Relations.
Hey, everybody. I can advance my own slides. This will be great. So our work over the past 2 years has been centered around Dr. Karen Mapp's work from Harvard. And we always like to start with this quote: "In order to maximize the positive effect and close learning and opportunity gaps, family engagement needs to specifically support student learning at school and especially at home." So what we know, and even before the Bellwether audit, we did extensive listening tours with Dr. Haas and with our team in the community at our schools. And what we came up with, or what we heard, were these 5 things. Families enjoy and want to support their schools. Families want more involvement in the form of events and volunteering opportunities. Our families appreciate student-led conferences and the conferences that our schools have, and data points shared by teachers. But a lot of times, families don't understand what the data means. And if you've seen some of, report cards and the reports that go home, I'm an educator, my kid comes home, and sometimes I don't understand what they mean either. So it's common, and we're working to address that. Families are interested in resources they can use at home to support their students to assist with improving outcomes. And that is consistent with our panorama data and our family engagement data from 22 and 23. So our Bellwether audit came in, and we looked to see how we can better improve our family engagement. And two things popped out, and I have the red arrows there to highlight what we were talking about. The two, and this comes from our Bellwether audit, and as Jamie Gellner said, we have our own website, or our own page on our website that has this in detail. But it says, our current state, ACPS has tried to provide opportunities for the community to engage with the division and schools, but community engagement remains inconsistent. And this may be partially due to the distrust of the school division. And number two, families and community leaders want more regular communication. So a big part of the Bellwether audit, although it's centered on instruction, another big piece was the way we are communicating as a school division and as schools to our families. So they wanted, or they found that communicating on academic progress is also linked to a number of barriers that our families are facing as well. So what this could look like. So this is from the recommendations page, and I'll focus right now on B, is deepening engagement and supports for families across the division. And they give us some recommendations. Here's what it could look like. One is create family-friendly companion guide aligned to the division's adopted curriculum to provide families visibility into what students are learning, what on track looks like, and what strategies families can use at home to support their students. The second one was increase family awareness of K-12 pathways and course progression. And especially we heard from our families, middle schools tended to be an area of concern, just especially around math, as Ms. Mitchum pointed out. Just families wanted to know, what do my students need to take to reach their family goals for the student? So we'll talk a little, Melissa has talked a little bit about that, and we're working on that as well currently. So let's see, moving forward, what this looks like. So our departments have created an on-track Albemarle family-friendly guide, and this can be found on our For Families page on our website. And when we did our listening tours, what we heard from families were three questions. What does my child need to know? How do I know if they're on track? And what can I do to help our families or my student at home? So this is an example, as you can see here. This is a little blurry, but this is a screenshot from our On Track Albemarle. And this is kindergarten mathematics. So when you go to our For Families page, you'll see that we have a reading and a math family companion guide, and it's by grade level. And what you have down here are the answers to those questions. What does my student need to know? So we have taken the state standards and have made them a little more family friendly. If you've ever looked at the standards, they're just technical. They're really made for teachers and schools to indicate what needs to be taught. We made those a little more family friendly, so families can go in there and really see what students should be learning. The second one is, how do I know if my student is on track? So we do talk a little bit about report cards and how to interpret report cards, especially at elementary school. We talk about vowels, and those are some of the assessments that Dr. Domer was talking about. And then we also talk about some of the other assessments, like our quarterly assessments, and how to interpret those. And then lastly, we do link resources, both our resources and VDOE resources by grade level, and in math and reading, and what you can do to support your child's learning at home. So those are available again on the For Families site. They're also there's the PDF version, but then there's also, this is also on the main page. And that's important because one of the Bellwether recommendations, or what they found, was we were not doing a great job at making sure that all of our instructional materials were translated into the many languages that our families speak. So on the website, our whole website is there's a link to the top left, and families can click that and choose the language, their home language, and the page will revert to their home language, including the information on this document. Now, a lot of the documents from VDOE, some of them are translated in Spanish, but that's something we're aware of and we're working on as well. Another big focus this year was our academic family engagement nights, and we asked each school to do 4. They may do more than that with your concerts and everything else, but we wanted 4 family academic nights. Literacy, 1 on literacy, 1 on math instruction, 1 on another content area, and then 1 on either social emotional learning or multicultural education. So we asked principals to work with their stakeholders to find and their PTOs and their families to figure out what works best for them. It doesn't necessarily have to be at night. Some of these events took place on Saturdays, and some of our schools thought outside the box too and had these events in their communities. Again, really what we're trying to do is provide just easy access to our schools and our families, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it always has to happen in the school walls. We've also asked schools to work with their stakeholders, their community partners, and their PTOs to break down some of the barriers that may exist, including food and transportation. We asked that all events were tied to student learning and supporting students at home. So if you've gone to some of the math events, we were at a Walton event last night. It was their Science Expo, and they had great learning materials. They talked a little bit about what students were learning at each grade level and how, what resources are at home that are available to our students. High school events look a little different. It's hard to have just a literacy night or a math night for high school. We offer a wide range of courses. So we asked our high schools to continue to focus on events that looked at transitions and post-secondary opportunities. For example, there's a big jump between 8th grade and 9th grade, and parents need to know and families need to know what to expect in the 9th grade. Again, another example would be going from your junior year to your senior year, what to expect, college applications, things like that. So our high schools did a great job at bringing in the community to those events as well. In addition to the school-based event, Office of Community Engagement has been very busy as well. We've offered 9. We will be offering 9. We have 1 more community information session. We offer events in the community like our Southwood family event. We partnered with the Latino Health Initiative at UVA Hospital to have a Northside Health Fair that was at Albemarle High School. I think we served over 400 families there. They had peds. They had the cardiac department there, basic health, diabetes testing. So again, trying to tackle the basic needs that our families are facing. We have a few conferences, the ACPS Equity Conference. We worked with our family council and some other folks to offer Race Matters, and that's in our school. And that's always talked about race and how that still plays a factor in our schools and with our families currently. We're also working with our students and empowering them. This year, we've created student senates at each of our high schools, which include our affinity groups. And that's our Black student unions, our Latino student unions, our GSAs. All of our student groups come together once a month at the high schools. They talk to their principals. They eat lunch together, and they talk about the issues that are facing them at their schools. And then twice a year, we bring them all together, and we call them our student leadership summits. And we're having one the week after we get back from break. And the school board will be there, and so will Dr. Haas and his senior cabinet. And it's a chance for our students to be empowered and to voice their concerns, their problems, and celebrations that they're seeing in the schools. We're also working with our school board to be in the communities and have magisterial events. And of course, we have larger community events like the Back to School Bash and other community events like Seville Sabroso and Seville Pride. We do have some upcoming initiatives. The Albemarle Foundation for Education is working on an initiative to bring some equity to our schools that need it the most, called the School Champion Initiative. And that's where we're trying to bridge the divide between our schools and our communities. Just like there are barriers between our families and our schools that were amplified by COVID, we're trying to build that bridge back to our community partners. So the School Champion Initiative is going to look at community partners and organizations to wrap around some of our schools to provide time, talent, and treasure to some of our schools that are in this pilot program. And we're hosting a breakfast tomorrow with our community partners to tell them a little more about that. We're also looking at a senior stay day at the end of the year. Through our research, we found that most seniors most of our seniors actually stay in Albemarle, Charlottesville area after graduation. That could be they're attending PVCC or UVA, or they decided to join the workforce. So we've partnered with the Equity Center and UVA Pipelines and Pathways to bring over 40 different organizations to this event. And what we told the organizations is we don't want part-time jobs. We don't want low-wage jobs. We want careers that our students can access, and a wide range of careers that are here in our local community. We feel that if we have a strong local economy, that only helps our school system. So that will be happening at the end of April. And next year, we have some larger plans to try to work with the Equity Center and our community partners to address some of the basic needs that some of our most marginalized families are facing, including health, mental health, and housing. So we've got a lot of things happening in the Office of Community Engagement. And that ends our presentation here. I'm gonna turn it over to Dr. Kaiser.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Irizarry. And to all of the panelists who presented this evening, you have been incredibly informative and provided the community with some valuable information. We're going to take about 30 minutes for our panelists to answer questions that are coming in through the chat. We have a few that we have in the chat. And if you would use the Q&A function at the bottom of the Zoom, and feel free to keep sending those through, and we will answer in the order that we are receiving these. However, do feel free to email the superintendent's office at k12albemarle.org email address if you feel you have further questions or do not get an answer due to lack of time. I do ask that if anyone has questions related to a specific situation, that they touch base with the school personnel as opposed to school division personnel. And that is probably the best way to get answers to those questions. So now let's go into our questions for this evening. And the first question, let's see, we'll go to Ms. Mitchum. Will families have access to Zern math technology for home practice, including starting immediately and over summer? We hear it's great, and thank you.
I'm actually going to ask Mr. Domer this question. So even though it is about math, I have taken the training. I actually don't know about the access for summer as an intervention program.
We are planning to use it in our summer learning program over the summer. We are also working on how to use it at home and provide access to that. Both of these programs coming on board in the last 3 weeks, with just 12 weeks to go, where we are working to see how they work best in schools, and really we'll focus on how to get them home access as soon as possible, but definitely kind of as part of a comprehensive program next year.
All right, thank you, Mr. Domer. And the next question for Ms. Heathcock, or maybe Mr. Domer might be your question as well. Sort of similar question as with the Zern, but for the All-In Virginia Technology for Reading, will families have access from home for additional practice?
We're working with Alexia trainers on this as well. Students are only supposed to spend 20 to 80 minutes a week on the computer. It's really a hybrid program where they spend 20 to 80 minutes a week on the computer, and the program finds out if they need extra practice, and that's actually done with a person, a reading specialist or a teacher. So we're trying to see kind of what the benefit is to extra practice at home in that program.
All right, thank you, Mr. Domer. Ms. Heathcock, for HMH into reading, There are so many components in the kits for teachers and many extras in the teaching guides. Will ACPS be doing work to focus teachers' instruction on the most impactful and essential components?
That is a great question. And we have been doing a lot of, having a lot of conversations around that with teachers and with HMH. So the first thing that we're doing is kind of putting out a universal 120 minutes for English language arts block for next year. So that will be the same at each elementary school, at each grade level K through 5. And then in that 120 minutes, we're looking at how to block that so that the different components of HMH can be taught in the time that they have. And so one thing that actually we did talk to HMH about today with the April training that teachers are getting is exactly going over which components are absolutely mandatory that students have to experience, and then what are some of those extras, excuse me, that allow teachers the flexibility to make instructional decisions and use those when needed based on the formative assessments that they're doing. So definitely we'll have kind of the must-do components, and then there'll be actual professional learning and training around the components that teachers have the flexibility to use when needed.
All right, thank you so much. Ms. Mitchum, on middle school math, will there be consistent options across all schools for moving into Algebra 1 in 8th grade? Great to see the focus on the rising 9th graders, but when will changes be enacted to ensure all students in all middle schools can take Algebra 1 in 8th grade? If you don't start in the most advanced math track in 6th grade, it's not always possible to get to Algebra 1 in 8th grade, which is the national recommendation.
Thank you for that question. We actually, a group of us were meeting related to that work today. We've talked to the middle school principals about some plans going forward. The next step really is to hear from more of the middle school teachers and to come together with a really solid strategic plan and timeline. What I will say is one of the things that we're committed to is that any student who wants to move into Algebra 1 as an 8th grader next year will have access to an Algebra Bridge program this summer. So again, just to tie back to what I said earlier, my vision for this and the vision of everyone and the team is that students can get the preparation that they need to access Algebra 1 as an 8th grader throughout the course of their middle school pathway. So we know that students who didn't take Math 6 Compacted this year will need additional supports. So we get that. And we also want to make sure that a student could take Math 6 and then later still get to Algebra 1, because we don't want a student to feel like they have to rush into acceleration in 6th grade. So we're looking at all of the components, all of the pieces. We're looking at data, we're looking at research, we're looking at best practices and what's successful in other divisions. So we're just really trying to make a sound, informed plan that we can communicate out to everyone in the community, to parents, and make it clear and consistent across the division. So hopefully the essence of your question was that I'm interpreting it correctly, that it is, will everyone have access to the same opportunities and preparation across the division? And the short answer to that is yes. But we are still looking at all of the components that we need to have in place to ensure that that happens and that we can communicate them out to everyone. But we do know that there's a lot of people that need to give us some more input, and especially our middle school math teachers, because they're going to be the ones that are doing the work to make sure that this happens.
All right, thank you so much. The next question is for Ms. Gellner. I see that the division is developing the theory of change. Can you tell us a little bit more of how the division will be using the theory of change in their work?
Sure. So we'll actually be coming together this spring and this summer as we kind of wrap up this school year and celebrate successes and then start strategically planning for next year. Anson and Akeisha from Bellwether will be joining us in June and helping us to strategize around how we can really implement the theory of change. So what you saw tonight is really a snapshot of the visual. There's a more comprehensive document that includes feedback from all of the stakeholders with more detailed ideas around engagement, and also a rubric that kind of describes specific actions that staff should be taking and where we can measure those impacts with what metrics. And so when all of that is finalized, we can share a lot more of that with the community, and they can kind of see how we'll be holding ourselves accountable to that progress. But with a lot of cultural change, we're talking about shifting behaviors with people. And so it's something that we're going to keep putting in front of people at meetings. And people should be doing personal reflections on it individually.
All right, thank you. I think the next two are for Ms. Heathcock or Mr. Domer. Do families have access to the Dibble screening results for reading in grades 6 through 9?
I do not believe that we sent the Dibbles report home across the school division as we were using it for the first time this year. All 6th graders did get screened. 7th through 9th graders, we screened students who were identified as needing intervention or who have failed the SOL test. I'd say if parents are interested, they should reach out to their school, either their English teacher, or if they know that their student is working with a reading specialist, reaching out to the reading specialist if they haven't gotten that data and they're interested in seeing it.
All right. And then will ACPS be piloting the expansion of vowels to upper grades 3 through 8 next year?
Do you want me to take that, Craig?
Go
It's our
ahead, Karen.
Sorry, it's our understanding when we talk to Virginia Literacy Partnerships about the pilot, that the pilot it's not the soft launch. So this year we did the soft launch, which means every student K through 3 received vowels screener. The 4 through 8 pilot is actually done just in some classrooms by the VLP staff. So we opted not to do that, but it will be ready apparently to be used for 8 across the division the year after next.
All right, thank you. Mr. Domer, will new reading and math intervention curricular resources be available in the next school year? Or is next year just for reviewing materials?
The preliminary list that went in front of I say it's preliminary because the State Board of Education needs to review it twice before adoption, and they saw it for the first time today. And we've been told that the state will add to that list through December of next year. However, 3 of the programs, SIPS, UFly, and Lexia, are on the state approved list. So at a minimum, we're really going to ramp up our support of those programs, particularly Lexia, as it is new to us, and UFly will be heading into year 2. So we're going to support teachers in bettering their implementation of those resources. We expect perhaps a math intervention list to come out after the math core list comes out. And so we are going to use intervention resources that might come along with some of the reading resources from companies that we're using, including Zern and ST Math.
All right. Let's see. Great to have reading specialists providing classroom support. But will educator time be specifically dedicated to this and staffing adjusted accordingly to also serve tier 3 students who need one-on-one or small group direct support?
I think this is probably the question we're working the most on and trying to work with the state as far as and really the literacy experts for Virginia Literacy Partnerships, who are kind of driving some of this discussion through the professional development that they've offered to reading specialists so far this year, which is that these three things are not, they're not always equal, and they're strategies, right? As far as based on what a school's data looks like, how you might implement a reading specialist in a school to have the most impact. And so we're working on data and working on those, looking at those roles and working with each school to think about how we support students who have fallen behind with some of those skills and need some additional support. I will say, right, that the Virginia Literacy Act calls for 1 reading specialist for every 550 students. We have more than that here in Albemarle County Public Schools by a long shot. And so we're trying to figure out how to leverage all of that staffing to have the most impact in thinking about the roles that a reading specialist can play within a school.
All right, thank you, Mr. Donner. Let's see. Dr. I and Ms. Gelner. Question is whether there is an official policy around student-led conferences in all schools and grades.
There's no specific policy on student-led conferences. It was an active strategy in our strategic plan after the pandemic, but it's kind of been de-escalated. But many of our schools have strong student-led conference practices. And so I don't know if Dr. Irizarry or Ms. Kastner, you can speak to what percentage. I don't know if we keep track of what percentage and who's participated. I don't know that off the top of my head, but we could maybe find that out.
Right, thank you. We don't have the exact percentages of how many students are participating, but we do know that we have received lots and lots of positive feedback around student-led conferences. And many schools where you've had principals there for a long time, they actually started student-led conferences as a part of their kind of strategic plan in their school. And that has kind of had a ripple effect in that it caught attention division-wide. So I would say most schools are conducting those in the upper grades for 4th and 5th grade, but we do have a few schools that have attempted to do it actually school-wide. And so if anyone would like to reach out to me directly, I could be happy to share more information on that.
Thank you, Dr. Kastner. Ms. Mitchum, can you talk to us a little bit about the timeline for the math adoption?
For the high quality
Standards.
instructional, the standards. Yes. So the standards were approved and we had the option this year to partially crosswalk or not crosswalk at all, or fully crosswalk, which a full crosswalk year would have been that we would have taught the 2016 math standards and any changes as a result of the 2023 math standards. Like most school divisions in the state, we chose not to try to crosswalk this year because in the past, when school divisions did that sort of doubling up of the standards in a year, they were given a full year to plan for that, and we were not. The new standards were not actually fully approved until after the school year had started. So we partially crosswalked, which means if there were some critical things that a student needed to get this year as a 2nd grader, because it was being moved from 3rd grade down to 2nd grade, we did communicate that out to our 2nd grade teachers. There were also a few things that were being moved from 8th grade down to 7th grade. So our 7th grade teachers were made aware of that so that they could teach it this year so that the student wouldn't miss that information. But we will be rewriting all of our pacing guides and curriculum frameworks for mathematics in June, starting in June, so that when we come back to school in August, we will actually be teaching the new standards, the 2023 standards. So we will align the materials and curriculum that we already have and things that are recommended by the Department of Education so that students are still getting the appropriate math instruction, but we are looking forward to having that approved list of resources that are really more comprehensive and clearly aligned to the 2023 standards when those are available to us in January of 2025.
All right, thank you. Mr. Domer, will students who are behind grade level expectations receive written literacy plans in the next school year? Wondering if if the plans are only for some grade levels, and if it's just some grade levels, which specific grade levels would that include?
I think this goes to some of the themes of tonight, right? There are a lot of moving pieces, and we get feedback from the VDOE around the Virginia Literacy Act quite often. Our most recent feedback from them was that that K-3 literacy plans will be required. And as the VALS screening tool gets implemented in 4 to 8 in future years, that's when the 4 through 8 literacy plans will be required. So that's what I would say about like in compliance with our state level literacy plans, it'll be all students K through 3. I'm certain as we try and screen kids in middle school, we're working on increasing our parent communication broadly as a result of the Bellwether report. But we will probably not implement the state literacy plan until they have one for 4th through 8th grade.
All right, Mr. Domer, staying with you. Can you talk to us about opportunities for summer programming, particularly around any Algebra Bridge program offerings?
I'm going to throw it to Ms. Mitchum for Algebra Bridge in a second. We are running our reading and math learning program K through 8. Those invitations should go out from schools within the next week or two. We're always waiting for mid-year data to come back and budget considerations. Every year we try and send them earlier, and we do. But as a parent myself, I know it's sometimes not early enough. So I feel that, and we are constantly trying to work and balance both sending early invitations and making sure that we get the right children. I think Ms. Mitchum might have more ideas about what Algebra Bridge might look like, so I'll pass it to her.
So unfortunately, Algebra Bridge is still in the planning stages. We are pretty close to having the curriculum completed by an experienced teacher who has been offering that already at one of our middle schools. What's different about this summer is that it will be available to students no matter which middle school that they are at. So that's really the main change. It's typically not as long as the full summer school experience. It's a little bit shorter and focused on those skills that they need to get ready for algebra. So I did appreciate that note in the Q&A and have moved it right to the top of my list to make sure that we can get that out as timely and as quickly as possible so that parents can plan.
All right, thank you. There were teachers that were not in support of the every other day reading and math in 8th grade. Is this being re-examined and with teacher feedback?
I will say for math specifically that we are looking at the data. That was some of the work that Dr. Carlock and the middle school action research team has been looking at. We only had 1 year of data, which showed that the actual SOL pass rates, which is just one measure, actually went up in 8th grade, the year that everyone did 8th grade math every other day. So this year we will have additional data. We'll have our new quarterly assessment data that we can consider. Of course, the Virginia growth assessments we can look at that, and the end of year standards of learning results. So we are, continuing to look at that. And again, as part of the process of making sure that every student is prepared to succeed in math to the level that they and their family wish them to succeed in. So I think it's something that's always warrants a close examination just to make sure that we're doing what's best for our students. But at this point, we don't have any plans to change for next year that I'm aware of, but we're definitely keeping an eye on it.
All right. Maybe Mr. Domer, could you talk a little bit about the formula for determining how many math interventionists, reading interventionists a school is allocated?
I can talk a little bit about that, sure. When a reading interventionist is serving students, we tend to do a 30-to-1 ratio. We allocate reading specialists kind of based on our differentiated staffing formula, which is how it had been for many years. It was just last year that we started pulling out the reading specialists from differentiated staffing. It didn't necessarily it's added a little bit more staffing, particularly around the high schools. And in some rounding to make sure that everyone had at least a full reading specialist to comply with the Virginia Literacy Act. But it was done basically on students who are free and reduced lunch versus the total school population. And it's about every 30 or 40 students in need to one reading specialist, thinking that some students do get support from their classroom teachers. There is no county-wide standard for math specialists. We don't staff them kind of from the county level. Schools individually decide to staff them from their tiered services staffing allocation. What ends up happening in practical purposes is that the schools who get the most tiered services support, which are the schools most in need, end up usually using some of that staffing for a math specialist. I think we have math specialists this year at Journey, Woodbrook, Greer, Mountain View, and Baker Butler. And so that is how that staffing ends up playing out. But usually it's a school-based decision with that tiered services amount of money.
All right, and I think we have time for one more question. I think the person submitting the question is interested in supports for higher level grade students, and what supports are put in place for those students to make sure that they are successful during their high school time, as well as their life after high school, whether it's joining higher education, going into the workforce. And I know at the secondary level, at the high school level, we have reading specialists this year. Can you talk a little bit, probably Mr. Domer and Ms. Heathcock and Ms. Mitchum about the secondary supports?
I'll go ahead and start with relation to some of the supports that the high schools have in place. I do know that they use funding to pay for tutoring. So they hire individual tutors for different content areas, including mathematics, in even supporting students who are taking what we would consider to be advanced mathematics, so Algebra 2 Trig. So students who were potentially in that class because they were accelerated as middle schoolers. So in order to meet the needs of those students, they do have funding to pay for hourly tutoring. The high schools typically are taking advantage of a variety of community-based tutoring services. So there's a lot of volunteer tutoring, and our high schools do have peer tutoring programs that are very effective and very rigorous. So it just really depends on the school, their community, the needs that they have. And so there's sort of a menu of options that they put in place to try to support those students in other ways.
I'll go ahead and say, one thing that I think the data shows, and even in how we were asking the questions at Bellwether, was largely a K-8 and Algebra 1 lens, because the high schools, through many of the supports that Ms. Mitchum just said, have historically done a pretty good job with students. You can see it in our SOL failure rate of 11th grade English language arts is far lower than any other English language arts SOL failure rate, and our graduation rates are always very high. That being said, I think as a result of the pandemic and the Bellwether report, we do see an opportunity through the use of reading specialists to really go after making sure that our students are strong in literacy, both in decoding and in comprehension. The reading specialists are a new program at the high schools this year. They've all kind of gone after building good literacy and reading routines in classrooms within the high school, mostly focused on 9th grade. Each high school has approached, kind of in talking about the role of reading specialists before, how they were going to leverage based on their school and based on their student need those supports, but they've all really targeted how do we support literacy across the content areas with our students in our high schools, which are all very large buildings, and there's only 1 or 2 or 3 reading specialists depending on the size. And so they've really started to get a foothold. They have also mostly focused on 9th grade this year and thinking about how to build that out in future years.
All right, thank you, Mr. Domer, and thank you so much to all of our panelists for answering all the questions this evening. We have run out of our time together this evening. If you still have questions, feel free to put your questions in the superintendent's office at k12albemarle.org. And that's the email address that we'll put in the chat. Again, you can send additional questions and or request information if you send your request to that email address. Briefly to close, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Irizarry. However, before doing so, I would like to thank all of our panelists again for their time. I'd like to thank Ms. Rosara Gonzalez for fielding questions and monitoring the chat, along with Lauren Hunt. I'd like to thank Dr. Haas, Dr. Hayes, Dr. McLaughlin for attending the event, Kenny Wood for technology support, and Dr. Irizarry, who you will hear from last, for managing the slide deck. As I mentioned at the beginning of the session, we have recorded the session and we will send it out to our entire community. The session will be up on our YouTube channel. So if you need to access it, you will have it to access. Again, I cannot encourage you enough to email the superintendent's office at k12albemarle at k12albemarle.org. Email address in the chat. We're going to put it in the chat one more time. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Irizarry, Director of Equity, School, Family, and Community Relations.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Kaiser. We just want to say thank you again for everyone. And in these events, or these community information sessions, are designed for our families in our community. So if there are topics that you would like us to cover here, again, this was brought to us by some of our families as well. They wanted to learn more about Bellwether. Again, use that same email address. We're always looking for topics that are important to our families and our community. And again, if there's anything we can do, please reach out. Again, thanks for attending tonight, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you all for a fantastic session. Have a great evening.
Nice work. Yep, y'all did a great job. Very proud of the work y'all are doing. Rusty, you have a very fancy backdrop to your Zoom. That's really nice. You got to show me how to do that.
Sure thing.
Great. All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Daphne.
Bye,
Thank
Corey.
you.
Thank you. Thanks, Corey.
You're pretty quick there, Corey. Nice work. Stay on it, man.
Thank you.
Well,
Take
sorry,
care.
you were hitting it. Great translating. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't think Lauren was there, so it was like, oh my goodness, by myself.
You're both great. You are both fantastic. So,
Thank you. Have a good night.
All right.
too.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
All right, Daphne. I will see you tomorrow. Thanks for everything.
All right. Thank you.
Great work. All
Have a
right.
good night.
You too.